What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It is March. It's officially March. That means college basketball season, of course, and it means more sports, more stuff for us to talk about. It's a solo pod tonight, coming at you late this Sunday evening. March 2nd after the Academy Awards. I'm a big movie guy, watched those, got home. Now I'm just kind of settling in for a little recap for you guys. No guest tonight, just straight recap, ball talk, news, stuff to feed into your brain so you can know what to talk about in those Monday water cooler conversations. And to begin with, as we typically do with our professional teams, the Utah Hockey Club, because they are closer to meaningful basketball, a playoff spot, than the Utah Jazz. We'll start with them. However, they unfortunately picked up a loss yesterday, this weekend, snapping a three-game winning streak with a home loss to New Jersey. Still, like I mentioned, though, in that playoff hunt, a few points out. Obviously, some things have to happen there. Teams ahead of them, you don't want them to win too many games. Teams around you don't want them to win as well. And the hockey club has to win more games. It's a tight race there in the standings to make the NHL, the Stanley Cup playoffs. Um, However, hockey club still got, about a quarter of their season left. Still a lot of games to be played. And we've seen them, like I mentioned, they had that three-game winning streak. They've shown that they can put together these wins. Even with this young team, they're growing, maturing, and showing that they can kind of make a run at this against some pretty good teams. They're dropping five or six goals sometimes in these games. They're not giving up leads like we mentioned with Jackson last week. I hope maybe check out a game in person as we get down this stretch, as they try to get into the playoffs to see what this team looks like on the ice. And I'm excited. I mean, it would be great to just have a playoff series here in the state of Utah. Like I mentioned, meaningful hockey, meaningful sports being played at the Delta Center. So we'll for sure keep you updated on them, more in our look ahead later. Jazz, as I mentioned, not close to the playoffs. 1-3 on the week and still in the bottom three, giving them the best odds at the number one pick in the NBA draft come June. The lottery will be in May, so after the regular season ends next month in April, we'll wait a bit. They bring in those ping pong balls, where hopefully the Jazz will have about a 15% chance at the number one pick, most likely Cooper Flag out of Duke. And we'll see if the balls fall the Jazz way to see where they land, like I mentioned in that June NBA draft. Should be, if things fall right, as they should, Jazz possibly their highest draft pick, I should say, in decades. So it could be, it could turn from a very kind of depressing time to be a Utah Jazz fan to suddenly an exciting time, depending on how that falls over the next few months for them. But like I've mentioned over the last several months, put yourself in the best position, best odds to get that spot. And the Jazz are still doing that by losing more games than they are winning. If they can stay below that 20 game threshold, I think they're around 15 wins. So you want to fall below 20 wins on the season. If you can do that, you give yourself a pretty solid shot at that top three odds. Moving on to a little college basketball recap. This is probably the big story of this week. BYU is still winning, but that's kind of not new at this point. So the news is Utah State, who up to this point had been the winning team in the state of Utah, the Aggies, losing consecutive games for the first time this season. Now, given both games on the road, away from the Spectrum, it's harder to play. We're getting into that part of the season where maybe the gas starts to run out a little bit. Certain teams are playing a little harder because they can feel themselves getting closer to that NCAA tournament spot. And so Utah State loses on the road to Boise State and then at Colorado State as well. So kind of the opposite of what we always say, you want to peak at the right time. Whatever the opposite of peaking is, bottoming out at the right time, or at the exact wrong time is a little bit of what's happening with Utah State. We'll see if they can turn things around. There is a bit of an opportunity here with one more game, and then the Mountain West conference tournament as well. So a little bit of a kind of way to salvage this end of the season for the Aggies heading into the NCAA tournament. As I've explained to a few people, as we talked about last week with Jackson as well, just on sheer number of wins that they've gained so far this year, I don't see the Aggies falling out of the tournament altogether. They should still be in that big dance. However, the seed, who they end up playing could be very much on the table depending on how they finish out this season. Not how you want to do it, losing two in a row this past week. Like I mentioned, BYU still winning. They've won six in a row, the men's basketball team. BYU women's basketball, however, four losses in a row, so basically the opposite. However, two of those losses coming in overtime, and most recently on Saturday this weekend on a half-court buzzer beater shot up on the hill at the Huntsman Center to the University of Utah women's basketball team. So tough break there, but these, it's a game of inches, as they say. That half-court shot goes one way or the other, going to overtime, or second overtime, I should say, and things could end differently for BYU. So the four-game losses, a bit of a fragile thing. However, not what you want there heading down to the end of the season for those Cougars. And then flipping the page to the other team that was on the right end of that buzzer beater, or the half-court shot, I should say. Utah women's basketball getting that shot from Maddie Wilkie. However, still 2-2 in their last games, in last four games. So not exactly, like I mentioned, want to be peaking kind of at this point, not giving up games as the Utah women's basketball team has a little bit more on them coming up, as well as the BYU women's team in our look ahead. But lastly, for our recap, the other Utes team, the Runnin' Utes, Utah men's basketball. I believe this happened right after we recorded, like the day after we recorded last week. So last Monday, Craig Smith, head coach of the Runnin' Utes, was let go, fired after, what seemed like a couple of good wins, but then a loss for that Runnin' Utes team. It seemed like they were kind of turning a corner. But nonetheless, after I believe three or four seasons up there at the U. They decided to move on from Craig Smith, and so the U is looking for its next men's basketball coach. If there's any interested parties out there, make sure you reach out to athletic director Harlan. Maybe he wants to listen to your pitch on what should be going on up there with the Running Utes. And with that firing, men's basketball losing at Arizona against obviously a very, very good Arizona team and on the road. However, they turn around and get a pretty solid morale boosting win, a blowout against Arizona State. So they split that Arizona series, falling to the Wildcats, but beat the Sun Devils at home. So some good and bad with the Utah men's basketball team at this point, but you'd like to think that they kind of show with that blowout win. Hey, things maybe weren't as bad as they were portrayed. We've still got a good group of players, and they've still got an interim coach who's fighting for them. And we'll see what they can do, moving into the end of the season here. Which brings us to our look ahead. Short break for the Utah Hockey Club over the early part of this week before they hit a road trip to Detroit and Chicago. So big test for those clubbers. See if they can pick up some ground there in the standings. Utah Jazz finish their homestand tomorrow, Monday, versus Detroit, then five straight on the road. So both our teams heading out away from Utah for a bit after some extended homestands over the last month or so. Utah State, as I mentioned, back-to-back losses for the first time this season for that men's basketball team, and they will close out the regular season Saturday versus Air Force at the Spectrum. So a big get-right opportunity there for the Aggies heading into the postseason. BYU men's basketball, big matchup this week at number 9 Iowa State on Tuesday. This is what Big 12 basketball is all about. There's never a night off. You think you get past teams like Arizona and Kansas? Well, sorry, waiting for you is a top 10 team in Iowa State. So should be another good one for the Cougars to test just how far they've come, just how dangerous they can be now that we are officially in the month of March. And then the regular season finale Saturday versus Utah in Provo. And then for the women's team at BYU, Big 12 tournament begins this week in Kansas City versus University of Central Florida on Wednesday. So, uh, you know, hasn't been the best stretch for the women Cougars, but they get a little chance to redeem themselves in Kansas City, with Utah women's basketball also joining them. Their opponent yet to be determined with a higher seed, so they've got to bye for that first round. And men's basketball, as I mentioned, later in the week, heading down to number 25 at BYU as they are currently ranked. That might change on Monday, so stay tuned as BYU has won six in a row. But regular season finale down there against the Cougars at the Marriott Center in Provo. Another big rivalry matchup with which the Utes came out on top last time, lest you forget. So the BYU has work cut out for them to, show up against a team with an interim head coach that's kind of fighting for the pride of their season here at the end. But before that rivalry matchup, I should add Utah men's basketball home game at the Huntsman against West Virginia. So big chance for the fans to come out for that one, get one last look at those running Utes in Salt Lake City. Which now brings us to our winners and losers of the week. No surprise here, as has kind of become custom on this show. If you win, if you continue winning, and you're not losing games, we'll put you in the winner spot. And BYU men's basketball, that goes to you this week. It's not easy to string together six consecutive wins in a number of situations, whether that be the Big 12, home and road games, heading into March, end of the regular season when teams are fighting for resume building wins, want to squeak into those last couple of spots in the tournament field. So props to the Cougars for peaking at the right time, doing exactly what you want to do. I know it's an overused phrase, but it's hard to ignore that it's exactly what's happening right now for Kevin Young and his squad. We'll have a lot more on BYU next week after that rivalry game against Utah as they head into the Big 12 tournament on the men's side. We'll be sure to bring Jackson back on, break down kind of what's going on, and see if they continue this winning streak. Because if they do, winners once again next week. We reward winners here on the Water Cooler Talk podcast, and that's exactly what the Cougars are doing. So shout out to what's going on down there in Provo once again. Losers, on the other hand, not a big surprise here either. Utah State men's basketball consecutive losses for the first time this season, and they've lost three out of their last five. So 40% win clip, not really where you want to be in March as you kind of hit this most important part of the season. Obviously, a lot of factors there. The Aggies were never expected to kind of be where they are in the first place anyway, so it might feel, maybe a little harsh putting them in the loser here. But with the run they had put themselves in with, the kind of caliber with only losing, it took them 12, 13 games to lose one game, then they don't even lose another one for several games after that, like two losses in your first 20. So to lose two in a row after you lose two in 20 games, you got to kind of think about what's going on there. Seems like Jared Calhoun, their coach, is going to be sticking around, not leaving like Danny Sprinkle did last year. So they're building, they'll lose some players. They'll get to keep some of these guys that have been showing up. Mason Falsla, for example. However, Martinez, I would imagine, will be moving on. But you get, some of these other guys in that can maybe grow with this program at Utah State, and it seems like they've got a decent coach at the helm that, like I mentioned, got them to a lot of wins in a very short period of time. So no reason to think that Utah State won't bounce back from this. But for the moment, not where you want to be. Utah State gets that loser spot for us this week. We'll be back, like I mentioned. Want to recap everything that's going on as we get into this exciting time of March. March Madness, we're just about there, everybody. Tournament spots are up for grabs to get into that big dance, and we'll have everything you need to know on that going forward throughout this month. Hope you guys have all had a great weekend, enjoyed whatever shows, entertainment, sports it might have been, and we will be seeing you guys next week.